And we are back with Dylan Altemara, president of the Pennsylvania Equality Project and candidate for political office down in Allegheny County. Dylan, it's good to be talking with you today. I know um, over the last 2 years or so, I've kept my eye on investments that I've made. Actually, my dad made them for me
Mhm.
and then left that estate to me within his will. So, um, looking over the stock market and a lot of the uncertainty involving tariffs and involving unemployment, the economy is a big concern for a lot of people.
Mhm.
What are some of the financial opportunities or financial considerations people should think about as they're mapping out, say, the next year to 2 years worth of their lives?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the uncertainty surrounding tariffs, as you brought up, I think is going to be a front and center issue that's really going to have a great impact on just day-to-day cost of living. And I think, all levels of government really need to be open and honest that when you engage in a um, unthoughtful and sort of erratic tariff program, it's going to ultimately catch up to people because it's not foreign governments paying these tariffs. It's not companies ultimately that absorb these tariffs. It's ultimately folks like you and I that are going to be paying the price, and you're going to see it pass on the pricing. And I think it's only a matter of time before you see, all variety of goods. Significantly go up in pricing to price in the tariffs once they become sort of entrenched. So, certainly I think we have to look at ways to, provide targeted relief to folks through, the advocacy of a more rational and sound tariff policy. And if I'm fortunate enough to get elected to the 39th district here in Pennsylvania, I will do everything in my power to, work with our congressional delegation and our Senate delegation to ensure that they really stress the need for a more thoughtful approach at the federal level. So folks that are already struggling as it is to put food on the table aren't met with more economic barriers and just day-to-day economic anxieties.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because you see, about a month ago,
Right.
I was shopping at Walmart, and one of my go-to favorites is the Great Value dark chocolate bars.
Mhm.
And at the time, they were $1.68 per bar.
Mhm.
Nominal expense. It tides me over and it soothes that craving.
Right.
When I went to the store yesterday, the cost had jumped from $1.68 per bar to $2.24 per bar.
Mhm.
And as I continue to shop, I noticed the price of M&Ms. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to slam on the Hershey company, but M&Ms by and large for me are the much better go-to treat.
Right.
A big bag of those was $14.68,
Mhm.
which used to cost about $9 only a few years ago. So that's a pretty steep increase in price.
Right.
And my thinking is if prices for chocolate are going up largely because of the tariffs,
Mhm.
um, how will people be able to absorb costs like that, especially as we head into the winter months when costs generally go up anyway because of increases in demand?
Right. So I think the simple answer to your question is they won't be able to afford it. And that's sort of the unpleasant truth that everyone's sort of, couching to be honest about. I mean, at some point, we're going to have a situation where, because of the tariffs and frankly, beyond that, or before that, rather, because of price gouging, when it was kind of in vogue for companies to, utilize, supply chain concerns to, jack up the prices ever so often, we're going to get to a point where regular people are priced out of participating in the economy. And what that looks like once we reach that point, I don't know. But I really don't think, unfortunately, it's going to be an experience. It's going to be too soon before long that we're going to have to figure out. And a lot of people are going to be experiencing because on every single aspect of just basic consumerism, whether it's buying a house, renting a house, buying a car, not a new car, but a used car, trying to afford, groceries, trying to afford gas. The American people now, for many decades, have been squeezed, and it's to the point where I think that's why you're seeing a lot of candidates who are getting elected become a little bit more extreme in terms of the messaging because people have just, they've had enough. And again, it kind of comes to what we talked about earlier when, we have a political machine that primarily serves the donor class to the exclusion of regular people. They don't understand what it's like for regular folks to survive. And, whether it's tariffs, price gouging, supply chain issues, these are all things that are going to lead to more economic suffering for folks. And I think we really have to be open and honest about, what that future looks like, because I don't think it's a stretch to say it's going to be sort of, 1930s era depression, bread lines, food lines on steroids. I hate to, scare people and paint a picture that's really brutal, but I really do believe that's kind of the track that a lot of folks are heading down in this country. And we're kind of whistling past the graveyard in terms of just what it's going to look like for regular folks in their day-to-day existence.
So you and I had talked prior to today
Mhm.
about Governor Shapiro's plan to encourage more natural gas drilling here
Right.
in Pennsylvania, but simultaneously, he is encouraging growth within with green energy, with
Mhm.
climate protective energy resources.
Right.
If he were to go that route with energy programs that promote sustainable and reliable energy, whether that's electricity or some other mechanism, perhaps wind and solar power.
Right.
Um, why aren't we seeing decreases in consumers' electric bills?
Well, I think it's a situation where, the natural gas build out to fund the data centers, but also just to continue sort of an ongoing effort that we've seen over the last decade plus of just the natural gas build out. Obviously that's going to happen first because there are a variety of players that want to see it happen. Obviously, the natural gas industry, who put in a lot of money into political campaigns, want to see it happen. But also, too, if we're being honest, the building trades want to see it happen because of all of the various projects that are available to their workforce and their members. Natural gas is probably the one, Commonwealth wide build or set of building projects that present currently the most, the most upside or the most, you know, short-term economic security. As far as some of the governor's other renewable energy ideas, I think they're great campaign material, but I really don't think, if we're being honest, there's been a lot of detail as far as what those projects are, how they're going to be funded, how the state's going to put money behind those projects and initiatives. I think again, it's sort of the great divide that Democrats have to answer moving forward. Like it's one thing to say you're for renewable energy, but ultimately, what does that look like? What is the state's role in terms of leveraging monies that had previously been put out in the IRA and putting in a kind of a state matching contribution to build out, whether it's wind, solar, hydro, nuclear, because I do consider nuclear to be a feasible renewable or energy option. What is the state doing in those areas? And it's funny because when House Bill 205 was initially introduced, it was done so under the guise of, well, there's so many renewable energy projects in Pennsylvania that are facing sort of local opposition and local intransigence. So that's why we need to sidestep local zoning and local permitting. And when I asked the primary sponsor of that bill, Democrat Mandy Steele, can you, kind of outline for me, like, what are these projects? Where are they? What do they seek to accomplish? Of course, the answer was crickets because, it's again, one thing to talk about renewable energy, but it's a completely different thing to put renewable energy projects on the table through the securing of investment, through the promotion of funding at the state level. And I really don't see on a grand scale too many projects coming down the pike that are going to be of equal or comparable economic economic output as the more traditional natural gas and other fossil fuel projects that are currently under consideration.
So, okay, so you mentioned nuclear as a resource for renewable energy.
Yeah.
However, uh, recently, within the last 6 months,
Hmm.
I believe it was Meta has expressed interest in purchasing 3 Mile Island
Hmm.
so that they could restart it
Hmm.
and use the energy generated to
Hmm.
power AI technology.
Hmm.
Now, while I'm all in favor of AI technology, a number of the folks near 3 Mile Island pointed
Hmm.
out that that would put an immense amount of concern and pressure, not only on natural resources in the area, mainly water to keep the plant cooled,
Hmm.
but also it would drain energy that could be going out to the local community. Instead, that would all be rerouted to the AI facility. So
Hmm.
in reality, what that project sounds like it's going to do is, while it may be bringing in money to the local community through through the reopening of 3 Mile Island, our big concern is one, it's a nuclear risk. Two, it's draining resources such as water. And three, the electricity generated isn't going back out to the community. Is this the type of project that Governor Shapiro and the Democrats should really be touting?
I don't personally believe it's a type of energy project that we should be touting as a party, but again, unfortunately, we have to understand that the policies that are pushed and the policies that are emphasized just don't exist in a vacuum. There is a whole funding campaign structure behind those policies that don't get talked about. So a lot of the policies that are put front and center in this particular moment in time or in future years just aren't something that are thought of for the good of the project or the good of a particular part of the state, but rather they're the byproduct of many, many years of funding and lobbying that ultimately are climaxed through the announcement of these projects being, started up and onboarded. So that's the first thing. The second thing, as it relates to nuclear, just to not to get off topic, but we do need to talk about how on the federal level, there's really a push through, the regulatory environment to start nuclear projects, but with a lot less red tape. And while I think nuclear does have the potential to provide a lot of energy jobs and a lot of energy growth, it has to be done in a very, safe, common sense manner, because if not, situations like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, unfortunately, in a deregulated environment, might just look like little blimps on the radar. So that's something that we also need to consider and talk about moving forward. That energy is a very, very front and center issue in Pennsylvania. I think we need to embrace thoughtful, safe, environmentally focused energy projects. But any effort to, reduce environmental standards or safety standards, particularly within the lens of a unionized workforce, puts those workers and those communities at risk.
Now, one of the questions I have for you is both the French and the Norwegians have been front and center in terms of uh, building out wind
Mhm.
generated energy and wind stored energy.
Right.
In France, they've done so without massive propeller blades and very
Mhm.
tall windmills.
Mhm.
Instead, they have what look like 8 foot high cylinders that capture the wind, spin it internally, and then they are able to store that energy that's generated.
Right.
In Norway, north of the Arctic Circle, uh, the researchers and engineers were able to take water from
Mhm.
snowmelt and capture that, split the molecules into their separate components, so oxygen and hydrogen. And the hydrogen was stored as fuel that can be used to operate machinery and operate generate electricity,
Right.
but the oxygen was then just released into the air. So
Mhm.
that's a fairly stable and renewable
Mhm.
source of energy. Would you encourage uh, the Pennsylvania government to do assessments that take into account not only ideas generated here in Pennsylvania, but
Right.
to scan the globe for the best, newest, and the smartest applications that could be applied here in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, climate change and a lot of the recent uh, flooding and other weather events that we've seen, it can't be just one or the other. It has to be all of the above. It has to be a conversation about climate. It has to be a conversation about union jobs. It has to be a conversation about energy and the need for energy, not just on the AI standpoint, but also from this standpoint of, there are areas of the state that are growing, and that's going to be more homes, more schools, more hospitals, more just infrastructure of day-to-day life that's going to cause a greater need for energy. So, I think we have to be, certainly at the state level, but also at the federal level on the lookout for, any and all energy projects that make sense. Unfortunately, I will just, sort of, tamper that by saying a lot of times energy that gets promoted, just like any other industry that gets promoted, isn't necessarily promoted and done so because it's the most forward thinking or the best for the environment or the best for jobs or the best for any particular group. Oftentimes the projects that are fast tracked are the projects that have spent a number of years writing checks. And that's just unfortunately one of the realities of our current campaign funding apparatus that needs to be addressed. I think once we accomplish campaign finance reform, I think all projects will receive, I think, more fair and equitable consideration. But at this particular moment in time, I think regardless of what other countries are doing or what other parts of the nation are doing, until we remove, frankly, the legalized bribery, it's going to be difficult for those types of projects to receive the same type of consideration that other energy projects have sort of been able to cut line to receive, governmental approval. And that's just because of the money changing hands.
Okay, well, we are going to take one more break. And when we come back, we're going to have a rapid fire round of some questions.
Sure.
And I think it's been a great show so far. So stick around. We'll be right back right after these messages.